Hello, heretics and heathens. This is Lilith. I'm here with Renee, and we are Veritas Voices. I hope you're all staying safe and well in this interesting new phase of life that we're all going through together here. I know I've been experiencing a lot more anxiety and stress than before. I'm sure you all have been as well. I know I've been staying safe and inside. Renee, I understand you've been doing the same.
Yes.
No one in my family has tested positive thus far, so that's a good thing. But, well, unfortunately, the night is young. So tell me a little bit about how you're holding up, Renee.
Well, I can sort of tell you what the situation in Germany is like. In Germany currently, we are on complete lockdown. Most people, at least those who are considerate, don't go out on the street except for buying groceries or, the usual stuff that you simply need to do in order to survive. But
we all have to get food. That's kind of important.
But other than that, the entire house where I'm living in, like I'm living in a house with apartments, I haven't seen these people for weeks. Everyone's staying inside, everyone's staying safe, and we try to flatten the curve. And personally, I don't have any illnesses, don't have any symptoms, so I think I'm staying safe, and I'm doing my best to keep it that way, as we all are together in this.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear you're staying safe. For myself, I do have a cough. It came about before there was any coronavirus on the island. It's sort of a residual cough left over from a cold. So while it's a trifle annoying, I'm not in any danger. Should I cough, don't anybody get anxious about that. I haven't left the house really since it happened, except for once again to get groceries. That's one of the things that's been really difficult, is trying to get groceries delivered, that kind of thing. I know in Canada, we're definitely stepping up the social isolation. People are, in some cases, getting it. They've put down fines if you're actually under quarantine as someone who has either tested positive or just come from another country or whatever, and you're found out and about on the streets for anything, even groceries. The first occasion is what, $1,000 fine. The second, 2,000. The third, 5,000. No, actually, I think the third is 10,000. So, and then every subsequent violation thereafter. Obviously, many people are, because, well, yeah, we're trying to slow the spread, and it's working. The spread is slowing down, and I'm very relieved about that. Not going to pretend otherwise. I was looking at the stats for Germany earlier. They seem to be, there's still an increase, but it seems to be also leveling out a little bit to a reasonable range, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Not to a reasonable range, but it seems that the social distancing is being effective in slowing the growth.
Yeah. I mean, we are also doing our best to fight the coronavirus. Like within our shops, we have sort of lines on the ground in order to keep the space.
Yeah. That's good.
We don't have sort of the delivery services that you have. Like for me, it's also not really necessary because my grocery shop is about 5 minutes away. So that's practical for me. But I do think we also have fines if you are in certain places that are pretty much non-essential for you to be at.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can also get fines. I don't think it's quite $1,000 because that's pretty hefty, but I do think that it's definitely also important to establish incentives so that for people to stay home and to punish them or make them feel the consequences of their doing if they are not compliant within what is currently going on within the world.
No, I do agree. And it's a hefty fine. But again, it's not for anyone found out. It's for people who should be under quarantine found out. And I actually agree with it. Canada is, we obviously we have the disease here. It is spreading, but we are seeing some signs that we're flattening the curve, that it's being effective. And there's still, so that's a big thing. We're all pulling together and it's starting to work. Not the time to get complacent, obviously, but it's, we are all doing what we need to, and that's helping. And it's also been good to see the ways that people try and reach out and draw together from a distance. Throughout Canada at 7:00 p.m., people will go out and shout and bang pots and pans as a sign of appreciation to the first responders who are, obviously not quarantining because they're on the ground doing whatever needs to be done, and really putting themselves at risk for that. So that's very much appreciated on our part. And that's one of the ways we do it. I know in my parents' hometown, some people have started putting up their Christmas lights. Obviously, it's nowhere near Christmas, but it's a good way to say, hey, we're here and it's going to be okay. And here's something pretty to look at. And just remember that, just because we're not close to each other doesn't mean we're not here and together. And
pretty much a sign of support and of loyalty, like we have your backs and it's what everyone is doing.
Absolutely. Sort of a solidarity, brother. A little flashback to Life of Brian. But yeah, it is. And solidarity is very important at a time like this. It's difficult. I know for me, I haven't obviously been doing much as many of us have, but it's very anxiety inducing to be surrounded by these reports all day, every day, and be like, well, when are we going to see? I don't know. It's just partly it's the when you feel like you can't do anything, and really there's not a whole heck of a lot I can do right now. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating. I understand why it is the way it is. I'm not going to, I'm not going to be unreasonable about it, but it's frustrating to be in this position where I can't go and do anything. My parents are both high risk. My father has had 2 heart attacks. My mother has asthma because of a bad season of wildfires in their region that really did some damage. So they are completely self-isolating. I helped hook them up with a service that delivers groceries, which my mom was really grateful for. That's just a godsend because, their son-in-law is in the area and can help them. But, only so much. And again, transmission is an issue. So they're just being safe.
I'm glad that within your country, within Canada, that you have these type of services and that you have this type of help readily available to you.
Yeah, well, and in fairness, I think, prior to this, the service was used by mostly, retirees or disabled people, or, occasionally someone in a rush who's like prepping for a party and I can't finish my cooking and go get the extra things. And, you're like, okay, great. Just come quick. I'll pay extra. Just get me the whatever I need for my whatever. And, so now it's basically everybody's using it. And the service is completely overwhelmed, which I get. I'm not surprised, but it means you have to be patient and plan ahead, which, that's fair. I'm glad that a lot of restaurants are hiring their normal service staff to do delivery. There's certainly been because a lot of restaurants have closed their dining rooms or severely limited them, which of course I'm all for.
Yeah.
And so now they're serving by driving things to people, and that works great. I have to say, I know it's not going to make up for it, but I'm very glad that our government has been working to try and help fill the gap for people. They're giving 75% of wages to some businesses to keep their people on over the necessary layoff period. There's all kinds of things. And actually, I had a friend from America asking, is it true you get $2,000? I'm like, well, I don't get $2,000 a month, but people who are, on layoff but don't qualify for employment insurance are getting $2,000 a month, while we're all stuck at home unemployed. So that's great. It's still, obviously, it's not, there are still lots of things that's not going to cover. But well, let's just say we're better off than our neighbor.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up America, because obviously coronavirus is also a health issue, and therefore it is a healthcare issue. And when you are talking about healthcare issues, then obviously also, especially for our audience who are presumably largely American, you also, I think at least, need to bring up the topic of healthcare in America, if you can even dignify their system with that term.
Yeah, well, it is healthcare if you're rich enough to pay for the insurance. It's a terrible system. Republicans caught Canadians bitching about wait times and have used this as a sign that we hate our healthcare system and would totally prefer the American system. And we're like, oh, no. That was bitching around the coffee, around the coffee table. That's not, no. We won't, my brother-in-law, again, lives close to a border town, so he keeps a post office box in the States for when he's just ordering stuff on Amazon.com or whatever. It's just easier than, just drive across, make a day trip. He won't make that day trip for maybe 5 hours in the States without getting traveler's insurance, one-day traveler's insurance.
Yeah.
Because God forbid, reason forbid, he gets injured in anything. He doesn't have that. He has to go bankrupt or hope he can make it across the border for care. And that's just not a world. That's not something I'm okay with.
Not a world.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah. Not a world that you want to live in, I think.
I would much rather be where I am. Much.
And also, I do want to bring up this personal anecdote of mine, because I think it's relevant, and also sort of a little bit of a trigger warning to our American viewers. I don't hate America. I don't hate Americans. I think most Americans I engage with online are great people. I like them a lot. They're great. They're respectful. All very nice people. What I don't like about America is the political and the healthcare system. And pretty much, yeah. And also the education system and the amount of ridiculous money that you have to pay for in order to study. But with that said and out of the way, I do want to raise a point out of my personal life because it's important to me and it's dear to me, and I think it really shines light at what can happen and what really is a fundamental, big, problematic issue in America that needs to be dealt with. So, as some of those people who know me from Twitter, some of our viewers may know, in 2011, when I was 14 years old, my mother had liver cancer, and the treatment, as you may imagine, was very costly. And unfortunately, many of you also know that unfortunately she didn't make it. Like, my mother died of liver cancer. But when I discussed all of it with my dad, I think recently the monetary issue with the treatment, I think it's a few months back when I discussed that with him, when we were also having a discussion about healthcare and that sort of stuff. And what he told me was frankly shocking to me, because he did receive the bill from the hospital, but it was paid for by the health insurance, and the amount of money that the amount of costs that needed to be covered was just shocking to me. Mom's whole treatment, and it was successful, had cost a total of 250,000 euros.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, the money that we had at that time, it wouldn't have even covered half of it.
No.
That would have financially wrecked us completely. It would have screwed our future completely. We would have got, yeah. I don't know what it would have done to my family. I don't even want to imagine what it would have done to my family financially. Additionally to my personal fate, and I do think that because I've also said this numerous times on Twitter, and I saw you like the sentiment, but I do think that you will agree with the assessment that for me is one of the main reasons why I don't think I could ever permanently live in America.
Yeah. And it's difficult because there are people I care about in America, and I worry for them. I mean, really, I do. I'm very concerned for them. And I don't think it's unreasonable to be so. There's a kind of selfishness to the American attitude that I've noticed in this and in other things, where it's just a case of, well, you take care of yourself and I'll take care of myself. And that's, I mean, the entire point of civilization was to pool resources. We all pay for the roads because that's the only way you're going to get roads, at least decent ones, paved ones, definitely. We all put in for education, for healthcare, for military, for all these things. There's a real selfishness to the political attitude, at least of one party in particular in the States.
I think it's
that I've
also
noticed.
a bit of mind of many of the citizens who vote that way, and that is why it's also not just Trump. It's a systematic issue going on within America.
Yeah, you may very well be right. It's interesting because I know we were talking about this in terms of morality, and we've talked about morality before. As atheists, we get that god awful, oh, you must not have any morality because blah, 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 or where do you get your morality from, or how come you're not raping and murdering people? I'm like, why would you think, is that what you would think without God? You just go out and start, massacring random strangers on the street because reasons. But part of that conversation has been, what is morality? I think, defining your terms is generally helpful in a conversation.
It's just one fun thing. I know where we wanted to go with this, but just one fun thing that I wanted to bring up with this as well as an additional example, because I had it as a reply to me on Twitter when a person was complaining about the sort of issues within America, and I was replying to a tweet, and then I've heard from another person on Twitter that he had to pay for the treatment of his wife, I think $8,000 in total. And that right, and it was like a big treatment, like the sort of treatment that you have within a catastrophe. But just imagine what that kind of thing alone would cost you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Minor thing, and I don't think that I would definitely don't want to afford that, and I think that's why I personally I would love to one day visit America. I would maybe love to go to Los Angeles, maybe love to go to New York or Washington or whatever country. I mean, for 2 weeks, maybe that would be a nice destination for me, even though I wouldn't go there during Trump's reign of terror. But but until these issues change, for me it would be unlivable, completely unlivable.
It's a terrifying thought, and certainly no one should either live in or visit America without health insurance, because it's, let's just say I find their approach to be uncivilized.
But anyways, we were just getting started on the morality underlying our stance on this issue.
True. No, it's, of course, it's an important part of the conversation. But I remember discussing with you previously, when we discussed atheist morality, bringing up theoretical bullshit, otherwise known as Scott Clifton. Probably should have said that in reverse. Who cares? He had a treatise on morality years ago that I still think is one of the best clear descriptions of morality and of why atheist morality makes sense. And his definition, which again, defining your terms in a conversation, very important. His definition was that an action is good or moral if it somehow promotes health, well-being, or happiness, or reduces unnecessary harm or suffering, or does both. And an action is bad or immoral if it increases unnecessary harm or suffering, or reduces health, well-being, or happiness, or again, does both. That is a very simple, very intuitive definition. And it is sort of what we all talk about, really underlying when we talk about morality. But looking at it in terms of this pandemic really brings together the interconnectedness of everything we do. Because, you see people who are being particularly selfish, going out and licking things, just as a display of their ego. They are directly they're potentially directly harming or even killing someone with that action. With viruses, and God, I wish evolution was actually taught in America, as opposed to the idiotic Christian straw man version of it.
Well, I think it was taught in some parts, but obviously
very few parts is it taught accurately. They're told that evolution is this ridiculous creationist straw man thing. Most of them don't actually know what it is.
Yeah,
but
it's like what they did in South Park.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's, it's a similar situation where you've got a virus. If you understand how viruses evolve and adapt, which is part of evolution, and they only even qualify as mostly alive, then you understand why it's important for all of us, even those of us who are not necessarily at high risk or infected, to stay inside. Because transmission is so easy and you don't necessarily know that it's happened. And the next thing you know, you're spreading it. And every generation, even if it doesn't harm the person, they're asymptomatic, they don't even notice it. That's one more generation in which it can evolve characteristics that are potentially deadly. I wonder, did you ever play the game? I don't know if it was on Facebook, but I know it's on iPad. I think it's called Plague Inc.
I think I've heard of it, and I think I've sort of seen some of my friends play it, but I've never personally played it. But you're welcome to explain to me if you like, and to the audience, of course.
Of course. Plague Inc. Can you infect the world? What it was, and this was very popular a while ago, a couple of years back. I think people are looking at it again. The idea was to be, and there were sort of competitions. You could compete with yourself to try and spread a virus. You could play it a bit like Risk if you wanted, but it's similar to Risk. You've got sort of the planet laid out, and the idea is you are playing as the infection.
Yeah.
And you want to basically wipe out the human race because you're an infection. And that's a thing that you want, apparently. So you do this. You go and you select virus, bacteria, various kinds of, there's all kinds of options in terms of what you can be, but the easiest one to win with, and the one you usually choose first when you're figuring out the game, is virus. But and that's sort of the disturbing thing, is that we're looking at a virus. If you look at it, if you think about it, you've got, and again, you can choose parasite, fungus, prion, which is a complex brain pathogen.
Yeah.
But yeah, the one you will win with first is the virus, because it spreads so quickly and it mutates so quickly, and that means you can develop new symptoms a lot faster than with something parasitic. Even just playing that game from the other side gave me an incredible appreciation for the real dangers here, because you learn that, causing people to cough and becoming airborne is a really big part of spreading. I'd actually encourage people to play that game. It's a bit dark to play from the side of the infection, but it's probably, it's probably a good way to get a unique perspective.
Yeah. Sort of educational,
if a bit macabre.
But okay, it's let's say you can learn something out of it. You can draw conclusions that are useful for your life.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. But again, I'm sorry, I got off on a bit of a tangent with that. But I still think, we look at the things we can control and the things we can't. We can't control how the virus mutates, but we can control self-isolation. And that is a moral thing. That directly impacts other people.
Yeah.
Millions of other people.
That reduces harm and suffering.
Mm-hmm. The idea being floated by some Republicans last week that they should just restart the country and accept that the old and infirm would catch coronavirus and die, but hey, most of the young ones will be fine. It was the most disgusting thing I'd ever heard. I wanted to be sick.
Yeah. Who exactly made these statements?
Who do you think?
I'm
summarizing somewhat. It was Trump saying the importance of the economy and blah, 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 talking about that, but just essentially saying, what was he? He said, the cure cannot be worse than the disease. And I'm going, for one, it's morally reprehensible to just say that a huge portion of the elderly and ill can just die if they get this. But that many additional generations of the virus would be catastrophic.
Yeah.
And I mean, with the delayed response and the general selfishness and egotism we've seen, the epicenter of the virus is now the USA.
Yeah. What I've also heard is that while it's probably not lethal or fatal for sort of my generation, the people in their 20s, there was still a student from Berlin who is currently in the hospital and who is having fever and who's vomiting and who's having really bad symptoms because of coronavirus. I mean, just because it's not fatal, it doesn't mean that the suffering will just go away, right? I mean,
well, yeah,
to keep in mind,
and it can be fatal to the young. It's just not as commonly fatal to the young.
Yeah, and what he's basically saying is, in order to save the economy, a sacrifice must be made, and these sacrifices just happen to be the elderly. That's basically what I'm advocating for. Once again, that's where I could again go on a tangent, because again, I think Trump is also, as I've also said multiple times on Twitter, the symptom of much bigger issues within America. I think he wouldn't have been elected in Europe. He wouldn't have been elected in Canada. And yeah, it's just, and I think
we've had some bad conservative leaders. Nothing at that level, though.
And I think the worst part is that he's probably going to be elected again.
It's a terrifying proposition. It's absolutely terrifying.
It terrifies me as well, but I think it's realistic at this point, unfortunately.
I remember, because we still watch a lot of American movies and TV in Canada.
As do we in Germany.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, and I didn't really understand countries yet, and Independence Day came out, and I was like, oh, it makes me so proud to be American. Mom's like, we're not American, we're Canadian. I'm like, what? No. And yet, I mean, now I'm like, oh, thank every God who has never existed that I am a Canadian. I remember there being a time when America was admirable, where it was a place where people went to succeed. And it's over. Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing. I can't imagine the very idea of going there for anything other than
a visit.
Yeah.
Holiday or something like that.
Or just to get people out. I mean, I feel terrible for the people who are there and who are potentially, stuck in this deteriorating country. I really do believe that it's a deteriorating nation.
Yeah, me too.
And, time will prove whether or not I'm right. That's it's disturbing. But yeah.
Yeah, and I agree completely. But yeah, with Trump, it's just. I mean, I also have to wonder with him when he makes statements like that. How can people still back him? I mean, it's not like people right now are completely renouncing him. It's not like the politicians are no longer behind him, are completely working against him. And that's also where I have to say it takes two to tango. And
Yeah,
that
no, you're right.
is that it's by and large Trump, but it's not just Trump. And
Well,
there are
it's the entire mechanism underneath him, which is largely actually composed of evangelical Christianity.
yeah, and even if Trump were to get removed, and even if they then get bidden, which I don't see happening at the moment, I think even then it would still be catastrophic, and I still wouldn't consider.
It's a very disturbing thought. There is one thing that actually I was discussing with my mother that brought out some of the reason why people still support Trump, because I mean, we've all heard of Fox News being so infamous for being, shall we say, twisted. There's a great sort of bogeyman of the so-called liberal media. And it sounds a bit ridiculous to those of us outside the States, but with their news agencies, as I understand it, and Americans, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, there really is an intense bias in the media. I mean, there's always a bit of bias, don't get me wrong, I understand that.
Yeah,
but
I mean, biases are never present within our thinking and within our daily lives.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But this is beyond that. I mean, we see the dishonesty of Fox. If you have access to any other news source in the world, and then you look at the version of twist that Fox puts on things, it's unbelievable how manipulative and dishonest they are. You know, it's a lot of implied things, but they're very clearly steering things towards the most absurd, honestly, things you can imagine.
Yeah.
But very much the sort of Alex Jones terrifying ideas. But apparently in CNN and MSNBC, there is also a liberal bias to the point where they don't report on certain things. I doubt it's as bad as Fox, mainly because I think it takes a lot of work to be as bad as Fox. But the whole thing is it's not just that there's bias, it's that they don't even report on the other side. And you know, it's kind of funny, in Canada we have several news stations, but we have the CBC, which is technically public broadcasting, is government funded, and
Yeah.
yet still it has no concept of the level of bias that you would see in the American media. Like, there's probably a slight liberal bent for sure, but slight. And they don't refuse to report on conservative candidates or what they said, or even if they say good things, they're not cutting out half the conversation.
Yeah.
And the idea of doing so just seems very, very strange to me.
What I do understand, I again, to the Americans listening, you're all very nice people. We don't mean to bash on you completely. We just find the system very disagreeable. I think most Americans are great people and that sort of stuff. And after I've said that point, I would suggest that we go back to the morality thing that you brought up. But what I've heard just now from you, that I'm sort of getting flashbacks to my country in the 1930s and 40s. Because there was such a thing in Germany as the so-called Reichspropagandaminister, Joseph Goebbels. I don't know if you've heard of him. And his
Oh,
job
yeah.
was to sort of give the German people a narrative, like the narrative that Germany is the greatest country and that the Jews are evil and that sort of stuff, to indoctrinate the German population with the National Socialist ideas. And obviously, I don't think it's that bad in America. I hope not, anyways, at least. But what I would call that, what you just described, would quite simply be propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. And it disturbs me a lot. I guess I wish that Americans would. I wish they would check out news sources from other countries. I mean, Canada, we're a pretty close neighbor. Watch the BBC. From the UK, just get an outside look from that are a little less extreme in their propaganda. It's good to get more than one view, and there's such a thing as not being able to see the forest for the trees. And I really do believe that's what happens to a lot of American people. Again, I'm making what extrapolations I can from the outside. If I've made a mistaken assumption, I do apologize, and feel free to correct me in the comments below. But as far as I can tell, that's how I see it right now. And yeah, it distresses me. It distresses me. I have people I care about in that country. And it feels a bit like we were the arrival point of an underground railroad once before.
Yeah.
And I start to wonder if we'll see that again.
But anyways, let's bring it a little bit back to what we were saying about minimizing harm, minimizing harm and maximizing well-being, and what we were talking about there.
Absolutely. Well, for me, the global situation brings this into such, it brings the severity of your actions into such clear relief, because you've got so many different things that you see the direct results, basically, far more quickly. We can see countries that are being more proactive, that are taking better care of their people. They are flattening the curve sooner. And countries that have been slow to react and more miserly with their resources and their giving their medicine to the people who are most vulnerable and need it most have fared more poorly.
Just one question, because I didn't know. I don't know that word. Might be a language barrier. What does miserly mean?
You know the Christmas Carol with Ebenezer Scrooge?
Yeah.
That would be a miser, someone who doesn't like to spend money even if they have it. He's sort of the greedy rich person who hoards it all, that kind of thing.
Sort of a cheapo depot, as it were.
Yeah, that's not a bad term. Yeah, and in fairness, I mean, America doesn't have enough tests, but I think that's been a case of, you see, for example, for Canada, we sent resources to China when it was hitting bad there, and now they are sending us, now that they are getting things under control and we're kind of facing our curve, they're sending resources back to us. I mean, you have cooperation and reciprocation. It's a good way to be. But what elements of morality has this sort of brought to mind for you?
Well, I think obviously, like, the thing with morality with me is when I'm discussing with theists, then I then obviously my discussion about morality would be very different than the discussion that we have, because within conventional conversation, within my daily life, I pretty much live by what Scott Clifton has laid out. But the thing is, you can having a moral argument with a Christian, with a theist, is like it's like talking about color with a blind person, I feel like. But within the daily conversation and using the definition that you have laid out, I think for me it's just important to show solidarity, to stay at home, to don't harm anybody, to pay attention, that I keep my distance from other people, so that I also don't get sick, so that if I were to have coronavirus and I simply don't have the symptoms, so that I don't spread it, and so that other people need not suffer. And that is, for me, I think, the right approach to take. And that is, I think, the approach that we all should take. And that's the approach that I hope many more people, and most people, even though I cannot force them, even though I don't have any authority over other people, and I hope that the authorities that we have as humans have established will enforce it for us, that they will keep to these rules that I also keep to.
And we're seeing the result. That's my point. Where people act in solidarity for the good of the group, things are
for the greater good.
Yeah, exactly. But individuals acting for the good of all.
Yeah.
We're seeing the results in real time. And it's interesting, some of the hardest hit countries are the most religious, in part because people continue to go to religious services. I mean, you saw in Rome, finally, the Pope was like, no more services, go home. Yeah. Which was the right choice. Props to the Pope for that. But in the States, at least one governor was having conversations with hundreds of religious leaders and being like, you have to stop having these large gatherings.
Yeah.
Every outbreak has been related to a large church service or religious service of some kind, whether a mosque, a temple, whatever.
Yeah. And I've also actively seen certain people on Twitter, like with my backup as well as with my normal account. And I think that also, you're going to be ashamed of this, Canadian, but Seitan Bruggencate, you might be familiar with him, advocated that church gatherings should not be stopped, and in spite of coronavirus, that people should go to church and gather there together. And another American pastor, which I also think you're familiar with, Pastor Greg Locke, you are familiar with my pastor.
Yeah.
Also, at least last week, maybe he has changed his stance by now, but at least last week he still wanted to hold his services. He still wanted to have his gatherings. And I wonder, do these people just not care, or yeah?
Well, the problem is, if at least, how can I describe this? America has been very enthusiastic about the free market principle. And the free market principle is, in fact, very effective for some things. I'm not saying it's wholly bad, but when you put it behind religion, you end up with the most popular religion comes out on top. And promises of healing are very popular, and they can't be followed through on. So this is where you get people saying, it's an act of faith to go to church, even though you know that you're not going to be able to. I'm sorry, I'm just so frustrated. It's an act of faith to just go to church and trust God that because of the virtue of your continued worship, you will not be sick. And that's obvious. Like the data, the data is pretty epic. The countries where people most go to church or mosque or anything else, that's where the spread is the most virulent and the death toll is the highest. Real life occasion where religion literally kills.
Yeah. So sort of the inference would be, well, if I have faith and if I worship God and if I go to church and if I'm still faithful to him and pray to him, then he will protect me from the coronavirus and I won't get sick. But that is obviously a false inference, and we have statistics which back us up on this, because God is not real and religion in that case is literally harmful, and that's why we're anti-theists and outspoken atheists, because your beliefs affect your actions, and the actions in this case are severe and fatal.
It's true. And it's true, and as disturbing as it is, it's a very clear, immediate visual breakdown of what happens, when you have morality just looking for the good of people, and when you have morality based around religious ideals. And religious ideals spread the sickness, and ideals based around the good of human beings slow and prevent the spread.
Yeah.
We're watching this in real time. I can't think of a better argument.
Yeah. And that is sort of where I want to maybe bring this final quote, and then we should maybe fully come to the end, or not a quote, but a saying from Jesus that I think, or I know you very much like, because you have brought it up in the past many times. You should buy their fruits.
Yep.
Yeah. And when your religion has as its fruit death and suffering, then you should know that these fruits are rotten. And you should know that the source of these fruits is not a good.
Yeah.
A good tree is a bad tree, and bad trees bring bad fruits, and good trees like secular humanism, like what we are advocating for, those at least bring or prevent bad fruits, and they bring good fruits insofar as less people die.
Absolutely. Well, as you say, by their fruits you shall know them, and their fruits are painfully clear. Faith kills, and humanism heals.
So with that said, if you want to suggest some, that's to the audience, if you want to suggest some topics to us, or if you want to reach out to us on Twitter in order to send us tweets for batshit believers or articles for Headlines from Hell, the links will be included below. What will also be included below is a link to Lilith's Patreon page.
Yes, please. I know this is a terrible time to be asking for money, but I really want to be able to have guests on here. I want to be able to do all kinds of things, but unfortunately I am very limited in what I can do with my current equipment. Basically, I just need a high quality laptop. And then I know there are lots of friends we've talked to who want to reach out and be able to, group together, have interviews, share an episode of crazy batshit believers, tweets from batshit believers. I would love to have friends on to read those with us and all face palm together. But I need the resources for that. So if you're willing to help with that, that would be amazing. I would appreciate that so much, but only if you're able. I realize this is a time when we all have to be pragmatic with our resources, and your health and well-being are more important than my having new shiny thing. So in any event, please like, comment, subscribe, reach out to both of us. We're on Twitter very nearly every day. Renee and myself will include our Twitter handles in the links below. But until next, sorry, go ahead.
As well as the link to Veritas Voices, we also,
Absolutely.
Please share news on there about stuff we're gonna do.
And share a screenshot just in case the original tweet gets deleted. If you find anything really juicy, that would be much appreciated. But until next week, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and reason bless.